Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Loving obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva, who is all there is. Janmadhyasya yato anvayadi taratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yat surayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation, made of threefold gunas, appears in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusion Maya of the material world. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amrutadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from Shuka Brahma Rishi. Go on drinking this sweet nectar day after day. So now we are entering the 20th chapter of the third Skandha of Bhagavatam. In the last two chapters, we saw the glorious encounter of Varaha avatar with the demon Hiranyaksha, described in detail, and how Hiranyaksha, out of his arrogance, attacked the Supreme Being and he was vanquished and thereby freed from his body. And after listening to this story, now we move on, and Shaunaka, we saw that Suta Maharishi concluded the narration by saying that anyone who listens to this glorious advent of Varaha avatar is blessed in every way. Listening to that, Shaunaka, the head of all the sages listening in Naimisharanyam, he said, okay, now we want to know, now that the earth has been established, that is Varaha Avatara has re-established earth in its proper place, how did Swayambhuva Manu go about engaging in creation? Because where we left was Brahma had created all these beings and Swayambhuva Manu was the last in the form of the first man, and he wanted to engage in creation, but he found that the earth itself was submerged. He came and complained to Brahma, and that's when Varaha avatar happened. Now, one interesting fact, in fact, that is also to be noticed is Varaha avatar, the form of the boar, comes from the nostril of Brahma. It was said that Brahma was breathing, contemplating on Sri Hari, and wondering how to solve this problem. And his breath gave out a small creature which grew humongous in size. The symbolism behind it is that he is our very breath, because that's what comes out of our nose, and what we take in and give out as breath, our very being, the essence of it, our prana, is Sri Hari, is the Supreme Lord. It is only by the Supreme Being's presence that we even live. So Brahma, seeing Varaha coming out of him, symbolically says that every one of us have the Supreme Being within us, and he comes out when invoked, comes out as in he manifests himself as the remover of ignorance, which is what Hiranyaksha represented. So with this beautiful story, we move on, and Shaunaka asks about what did Swayambhuva Manu do. And not only that, he goes on to ask about Vidura, because Vidura has been listening to Maitreya, and Vidura is such a wonderful devotee. So Shaunaka also wants to know what Vidura was interested in asking, because Shaunaka knows that more than his own questions, what matters is the questions of Vidura to Maitreya, because they will be of the highest significance. So he says Vidura was a great devotee of the Lord and a devoted friend of Krishna. He says Kshata Mahabhagavatah Krishnasya Ekantika Suhrit. So it means he is Mahabhagavata. He is also Bhagavata in that he is completely abiding in Bhagavan. And Krishnasya Ekantika Suhrit, that is, he is a devoted, single pointed devotion as a friend of Krishna. That's what he has. And he is not only that, he is the son of Vyasa, Dvaipayanad Anavaro Mahitve Tasya Dehajah. He was the son of Vyasa, who is himself a form of the Supreme Being. So Vidura is no ordinary being. And we saw the story of how Vidura walked out, leaving his brother and his son Duryodhana when they did not listen to his counsel and went on a pilgrimage. Of course, we also saw in the first Skandha itself that what happened much later after all this pilgrimage was he went back after the war was over and out of great compassion took Dhritarashtra and his wife to the forest and gave them liberation. So that happened after this dialogue with Maitreya, which was a very long dialogue after the war had gotten over. So Shaunaka is asking, what did Vidura do, this great being? What are the questions he asked? He was always devoted to Krishna. He was visiting all these sacred places and he was meeting with Maitreya and asking all these beautiful questions. And here one important thing to also notice is Vidura teaches us that when we go to holy places, it is not simply to go like a tourist there and do whatever is to be done by everyone, but the true purpose of going to a holy place is to seek out sages who live there, because they are the ones who make the place holy in the first place. As we saw in Bhagavatam, Tirtham Kurvanti Tirthani, they make the sacred places sacred. And therefore, it is important to seek out wherever we go the great beings, the great jnanis and bhaktas. So that's what Vidura did. And so Shaunaka asks, in the course of their conversation, they must have touched upon many more sacred stories of Sri Hari, which is capable of clearing all the sins, just as the holy Ganga. Because the holy Ganga flows from the feet of Sri Hari, and that's why it's considered so sacred, and it is so powerful. Even now, when we go to Ganga, especially if we go in the Himalayas, before it enters the plains and is polluted by humans, it is so pure and it's so invigorating even at a physical level, and it has great spiritual potency. Similarly, meeting these sages and talking to them has even more spiritual potency. Therefore, Shaunaka asks, please narrate to us, you be blessed, Bhadramte, please narrate to us what stories of the Lord were narrated by Maitreya to Vidura, because he says so beautifully that the only being worthy of glorification is the Supreme Being. Kirtaniya Udarana Karmanaha. So, the only one worth glorifying, Kirtana is to glorify, is the Supreme Being. Now, this may sound like an exaggeration, but it is in fact factual, because every single thing that everyone does, even from the simple act of breathing to all sensory perceptions, let alone various skills and talents people possess in science and art and all the others, every single thing is happening because of consciousness, and upon consciousness, the power, the Yoga Maya, which is the Supreme Lord's divine potency by which creation, sustenance, and dissolution happens. So, the most important thing to recognize is that there is only He who does everything, and therefore it is no exaggeration to say that there is nobody worth glorifying. And this is why it's important to not praise anyone excessively, just as not insult anyone, because even praising them can boost their ego. But if we just praise the Lord as it's said, then we are connecting them to their true position, to their true source. So that's what Shaunaka says, that only he deserves all glorifying. So what are the glories of the Lord? That Vidura asked Maitreya. And also he said, anyone who has any taste, true taste, will not be satisfied by anything other than the stories of Sri Hari. So nicely he says, Rasagnaha konu trupyeta Hari Leelamritam piban. So Hari Leelamritam means the nectar of the pastimes of Sri Hari, the Supreme Lord. Piban, by drinking this nectar, na tripyet, no, not satisfied, the rasagyaha. Rasagyaha means one who know true taste. One who are having the true taste for the divine, they are never satisfied by talking about the Lord. They always want to glorify Him, always want to listen about these pastimes, or always want to listen about the nature of the self or abide in the self, because that is the essence of true taste, rasa. So, having placed this beautiful question, Shaunaka addresses Suta, and Suta replies by saying, Vidura was indeed very delighted to hear the story of the Lord as Varaha avatar who killed Hiranyaksha. Then he asked Maitreya, further question, he asked, O holy sage, how did Brahma, after Hiranyaksha was destroyed, how did Brahma go about the purpose of creating living beings, the various living beings on earth, and populate the earth? How did the various sages such as Marichi and the Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, evolve the creation? How did all this happen? So this is what Vidura asks. And here, a beautiful narration is given which has deep spiritual significance. The story of how Brahma goes about creating. And so, first, again briefly, it's recounted how the Virat Purusha comes. By the Virat Purusha as the cosmic being, how he came. We saw this already many times. How the three gunas got disturbed by time, and through that, the cosmic I thought rose, and from that, the five elements, the five senses, the deities, and preceding all that, the Mahat Tattva, the cosmic mind. All of this arose, and then from this, the Supreme Being rose as the Purusha, the Supreme Person, and this Purusha, the Supreme Person, from his navel, as it were, rose the lotus from which Brahma came. So we saw this. Now, here it is said that Brahma first, in his purpose of going about creation, created the shadow of ignorance. So, we saw this also briefly mentioned before, that when Brahma first went about creation, he first created 5 types of ignorance. They are all based on Tamas, which is the energy of sloth. So the 5 are Tamas itself, the ignorance, Moha, self-identification with the body, Mahamoha, craving for enjoyment, Tamishra, anger, and Andatamisra, looking upon death as one's own end. We saw this way back. So it's being repeated here that Brahma first, this is before Manu and the sages come about, of course. So it gives the reason behind the 3 levels of gunas and how they go about in creating 3 different types of beings and how the sages finally come. So first, the ignorance, tamas, creates this darkness. And out of this darkness, the so-called yakshas and rakshasas, these are beings who are interested in just simply consuming and simply remaining in hunger and thirst and always eating, they come. And it is said that they, as soon as it happened, as soon as these came about, these beings came about, they ran behind Brahma himself to eat him because they are hungry and thirsty. So all this has deep significance spiritually. So we will look at it first, the whole narration, that first the Rakshasas come about and they go to devour Brahma himself, the one who created him, and saying, "We will not spare you." And Brahma gets nervous, and then he drops that body. And then after that, he takes on the mood of passion, rajas, and from that comes about various other types of demons who are interested in sex and lust, and therefore they are immediately looking for sense gratification. And seeing this, Brahma is terrified again. So now again he runs, and this time he surrenders to Sri Hari, and Sri Hari says, "Your body is impure, cast it off." And therefore Brahma casts off the body, but thereby it is said that there is a light that appears, a shadowy light, and the shadowy twilight appears like a beautiful woman who is extremely attractive, and all these demons are running behind her and finding this to be so attractive. So this symbolizes how the whole attraction of lust is due to simply projecting images onto light, which is what essentially even anyone we see are. So in any case, so these demons are so attracted to this imaginary woman who's actually just a form of light, but they think there is a beautiful woman there dressed in a very attractive way, and they run behind her and they are glorifying her and they are asking her to come to them and so on. So Brahma sees this, and then he casts his body off again, as we already saw, and then he takes the body of Sattva, the mode of goodness, and from this he brings forth the celestial beings such as musicians, Gandharvas, and Siddhas, and Bhutas. And Bhutas are actually ghosts, but they are not malevolent ghosts, they are benevolent. And there is also other Pitras, the forefathers, and so many others come about, the Siddhas, as we said already. So many beings come from this form of Sattva that Brahma takes, and then finally he is not happy with that too. So he gives up his body again and he dies, and then he takes on a new body finally, and here he engages through tapas. So neither through tamas, nor through rajas, nor through sattva, but through tapas, through austerity. So it says tapasa vidyaya yukto yogena susamadhina. So through austerity, through wisdom, through yoga, and through samadhi, through abiding in the self, Brahma came forth with the sages. The sages are, we saw Marichi and Atri and all the sages who bring forth the Sapta Rishis, the 7 holy men. And then we saw Kashyapa as one of their offsprings, and then Swayambhuva Manu, who is also situated as a very pure being in the humanly form. And he is now about to go forth multiplying the human race now that earth is stable. So this is the story of this chapter. Here what's important to recognize is what Brahma represents when he starts creation is no different from how we go about when we wake up, or when we even go to sleep and wake up, or even through various other ways, through different stages of life and so on. When we are identified with the mode of ignorance, then we produce negative thoughts, which are these slothful thoughts which consumes us. And it is said that these demons came to eat him, the one who created him. Similarly, the laziness and the slothfulness eats the very host by literally killing the body and making the mind dull. So that is what we face when we engage in this mode of tamas or ignorance. What we create as habits end up wanting to devour us itself. Then when we step up to the mode of passion, we are active now, but our activities are engaged in lust, so desiring various objects and people and so on. And thereby we are imagining, so as it showed here, how they imagined a shadowy light to be a woman and they ran behind this woman, we also run around through this passion, imagining fictitious goals and fictitious sense of achievement, and through various objectives and people and relationships and all the rest, and only face frustration. And finally, because of that, we again end up affecting our own physical body, because the body, when there is so much sense gratification and so much stress and all that, it affects the physical and the mental level. So this is why Brahma had to cast off that body too. And then finally, or before that finally, as in with the third guna, Sattva, when Brahma takes on this body of goodness, then he engages in all this sublime arts, music like Gandharvas and Vidyadharas, and all these various cultural activities. So we see that too, when we are engaged in this mode of goodness and engaged in good taste and good culture, then we are still caught through attachment to art, attachment to music, attachment to also various noble causes, charity, getting lost in causes like environmentalism or this or that. And then all these causes again cloud our true being and we get lost in it, and thereby we get completely confused and we live identified with these causes. And so that's why Brahma had to cast off this body too. And then finally, when he engages in tapas, austerity, and yoga and samadhi, he brings forth the sages, the rishis. So that is symbolizing that when we engage in tapas, in true austerity, which transcends the three gunas, we also bring forth true wisdom, which is what the rishis represent. So when the body is identified with ignorance, we bring forth lazy demons. When the body is identified with passion, we bring forth lusty creatures. And when the body is identified with sattva, we bring about noble but lost beings. Finally, when we see the limitedness of all three and cast off all the three bodies, which is to say, we stop identifying with the gunas. The body is only an identification. So when we don't identify with these three gunas one after another, and we engage in austerity and penance, then the true wisdom rises from our heart, which is represented by the sages Marichi and so on, and which is also represented by Manu, the first human. So we truly become human, a wise human, only when we transcend the false identification with the three gunas. That's the inner beautiful message of this story. So now we have seen, therefore, how the sages and the Manu come forth, and now we will continue with the activities of Manu and the sages in the next few chapters. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.